Hello, welcome to another Chats from the Chest Freezer. The temperature is now 5.2. It keeps going up because I've had to take so many takes of this video because it's damn bloody cold. My first guest though is one impressive person. Her very first ultra marathon was a run around all of Wales. She's gone on to do some pretty damn amazing things, including winning the New Zealand Relapse Backyard Ultra. She was the first woman in the world to win at this format, which then gained her entry into Lazarus Lake's famous Big's Backyard, where she went on to have an amazing performance at 50 hours and turning up fourth. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy this chat. Here we go. Before things get any warmer in here, here's Katie Wright. So, Katie Wright, welcome to Chats from the Chest Freezer. Normally, I'd be interviewing my guests from the Chest Freezer, but you're an ultra runner, you go for a bloody long way, and there is no way I can sit in that freezer at 4 degrees for however long it's going to take us to get through a great chat today. So I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks for the invite. It's nice to have a
chat. Now, I'd love to start, before we talk about Big's Backyard and also Relapse, I'd like to talk about a bit of your running history, because you really only started to run when you were about 18, that's about 14, 15 years ago. So not a great, not that long ago.
Oh, yeah, so it's not, I really got into it by I did a charity half marathon to raise some money for a year abroad that I did. So I had a treadmill at home that my parents had, and I thought, I can do a couple of miles actually whilst watching Neighbours at 5:30 every night before tea. Did my half hour in front of Neighbours on the treadmill, and I think I only ever got up to about 4 or 5 miles for my whole training for this half marathon, and it was a bit of a step up to go from 5 miles on a treadmill to doing a half marathon. I think I ended up walking from about mile 8 onwards, and it took me about 2.5 hours. But it was a good day out, yeah.
Wow, and from there, basically, obviously, spurns some sort of passion in you to just go longer and longer and longer. And, one of the highlights, obviously, is you run around Wales.
I have, yeah. That was actually my very first ultra marathon. So I went on from the half marathon and did a couple of long distance, a couple of road marathons. Got into triathlon quite heavily, so ended up doing some long course triathlon, and then decided to give trail running a go, and longer than a marathon. So set out and ran the coastline of Wales, covering probably about 50k a day on average. A couple of days a bit longer than that, and it was a bit of a wake up call into ultra running and trail running, exactly. So yeah.
So with that, did you run every day?
Yeah. So I did a couple of short days if the weather was really awful, which it was quite a lot of the time because it's Wales. I would do just a half day running. So there were a couple of days that were only about 20, 30k. But then I did a couple of, the longest day was about 75 days, and that was about 14 hours of running.
So previous to that, had you done many back-to-back kind of runs?
I don't think I'd done a single back-to-back long run ever. So it was completely new, and probably a bit foolish. But I think it's a case of not really knowing what you're getting yourself into, and not having that fear of expectations that it's going to be really difficult. Just go and do it and don't think about it.
Well, you certainly went from zero to hero. So how did your body cope with it and react, going from never doing back-to-backs to all of a sudden doing 30, 40, 50, up to 70 Ks day after day?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of case of slowly acclimatizing. So you're training during the event and feeling stronger and stronger each day. So I started off not doing any more than 50 Ks in a day, and gradually, like as the weeks progressed, it was really painful. My legs were sore every single morning, but it kind of progressed to being able to just keep them going and ticking over for longer. And it'd take about an hour or two for my legs to warm up in the mornings, but they certainly felt a bit better by the afternoon. Yeah.
Wow. So,
I feel
did you have support along the way?
No, not really. I had my backpack and a bivy bag and some, I'd stop off there. Fortunately, you can't really go very far along the coastline in Wales without coming past a pub um, or a newsagent selling some sweets or a fish and chip shop. So I stopped off and I had a pub lunch and stayed at some B&Bs if the weather was going to be awful. And my parents came out for a weekend just to check that I was still alive. And I had one friend come and join me towards the end for a day of running, which was nice. But yeah, the rest of it was just picking up a couple of friends here and there for an hour or two, but the majority was all just me and some track.
So on that, obviously a lot of solitude. Where does your mind go on something like that? Doing it for, I think it was 33 days.
Yeah, thereabouts. It's like, it's such a long time to be out on your own. Your mind kind of goes everywhere. Sometimes it's just in a bit of the world of pain and you're trying to distract yourself with music, or I listen to a lot of Radio 1. So I didn't have a huge amount of like extra battery power, so I could listen to music for a couple of hours in the day with having enough battery. So I'd listen to maybe an hour and a half of Radio 1 in the morning to get a bit of external stimulation from other people's voices and not just my own voice in my head. Then just a lot of like thinking about what I'm going to do next, or it's just sometimes just thinking about that day, like I need to be here by this time, and where am I going to sleep tomorrow, where am I going to get some food, like the logistics of planning. So it was really varied, depending on how I was feeling.
Wow. So during that, were there many moments where you just thought to yourself, why am I doing this and I want to stop?
There were definitely low points. Particularly, I think there's one of the vivid memories I have is the day after I think my parents had left. They'd come up for the weekend, and I had this stretch of coastline at the top of North Wales, which is probably one of the most remote areas. Didn't really see anyone for the day. It was really warm, and it was quite a long run, and particularly long between like stopping for a cold drink at a cafe or whatever. And I ended up just getting to this point where I just can't, and sat down on this rock for maybe about 20 minutes, half an hour, and just literally in the middle of nowhere on my own on a rock with a beautiful view out into like the Irish Sea. But that was probably the toughest moment. I think part of that was having just had my parents up and having that extra support that was now gone was a difficult one to swallow. But you just sit down for 20 minutes, have something to eat, carry on, and actually about I think 3 or 4k around the corner there was this beautiful little isolated cafe in the side of the hill in the middle of nowhere that was serving up pancakes for breakfast. So sat there and had 3 breakfasts in a row. I think the cafe owner was a bit like, what is this girl doing? Sat there with like 3 plates of like pancakes and a big full breakfast. But it was good.
I think one thing that you describe yourself as stubborn.
Yes, yeah, that is indeed.
Following on from this Wales run, were you thinking during it sort of what's next for Katie Wright?
Not necessarily in terms of running. I remember there was definitely a point where so I had this about 6 weeks off before I went back to a new job, and there was a point about halfway through the Wales run where I was just like, you know what, I just don't want to. Why am I going back to this job? Why can't I just carry on running? And I definitely got the bug there for running, and I knew that it would be, I probably wasn't going to be doing many more triathlons, but that trail running was definitely going to be the thing that I'd be kind of moving on to. But and I started thinking about like maybe going out and doing a 100k race, and maybe working up to doing a miler at some stage. But it wasn't I didn't necessarily like find a good particular goal during the run. It was just this is what I want to do, and hopefully something that will continue.
So you've obviously then just searched the world trying to find a place that has some beautiful running. So you decide to become a doctor and moved to New Zealand. Is that pretty much it summed up?
Well, there you go. So when I did the Wales run, I was 2 years into working as a doctor, and I'd actually planned to come out to New Zealand a little bit earlier on, which would have meant that I, didn't get to have that time off to run around Wales. But fortunately or unfortunately, it took a bit longer to find a job out here than I'd hoped. So I ended up having this kind of 3 months time to kill back home. So it's a kind of a silver lining.
I follow your Instagram, and it's certainly filled with some absolutely amazing photos of every sort of aspect of the highlands of New Zealand. It's absolutely beautiful. But something that has always intrigued me, you head off on these long weekends with your backpack. I want to know what's in your backpack.
That's a good question. It doesn't really change very much because I'm not very good at buying new gear. I like to when I've found something I like, I don't really like changing it. So your general safety stuff. So I've got my PLB located beacon about a year and a half ago. My parents very kindly decided to give me a PLB for Christmas. So
that's a loving gift.
So that is always in the pack. Our safety blankets, rain jackets, and a couple extra layers. I'm not a fan of being dehydrated, so I generally take a good couple of litres of water depending on where I'm going. And we're really lucky in New Zealand in that there's such a good network of dock huts. I don't really need to take a tent anywhere, so I'll take, if it's in the winter, I'll take a lightweight sleeping bag, but in the summer at the moment I can always just about get away with a sleeping bag liner if I'm staying in a hut. So that really reduces the amount of stuff I need to take if it's an overnighter. But you get the luxury of a hut with a mattress and a wood fire if you need it, but again in the summer you just turn up and have your thin liner and a down jacket, and that's about it.
Wow. So explain to me one of these typical weekends where you just head off into the mountains.
So I spent quite a lot of time at home. I don't know if you can see behind me. I think
yes.
You probably can. There's a map of South Island, or the top of it. So we use this as our stretching wall at home. So during the week we'll try and do some stretching or some foam rolling in front of the map and pick a track that we've not run on yet, and have a vague idea of how long it is and vert, and how much we can pack into a Friday and Saturday night. And there's a good list going. I think the list is longer than I have weekends. So pick something that the weather looks reasonable and we haven't done before, and just head on out to the hills basically.
Well, so how far would you get on a typical weekend?
It really depends on like the terrain and I guess the vert as well. So sometimes I will go out and do maybe 40-50k in a day if the terrain isn't too difficult. But I just been down south for the last week, and we did a lot of climbing. It was very much walking rather than running, and it took us. There was one day that was 20 kilometres, completely off track, so having to navigate on a lot of scree, and I think it was just over 2,000 metres of vert, and it took us 9.5 hours to cover 20k. So
wow.
Yeah, it's so dependent on where you are and the terrain, and we had done a full week of climbing, and the legs were pretty sore, so we weren't going anywhere very quick, but.
Wow, that's crazy. So now, if we get into some of your ultra experience, I was reading that you only did your first 100K only in about, I think, the end of 2018.
Yeah, October 2018 was the first 100 kilometres, yeah.
Wow. So it's not that long ago. And then only, about sort of 4 or 5 months later, you did the New Zealand's first last one standing event, which is Riverhead Relapse, which you famously took out in 30 hours. Tell me about Relapse, because I must say that you're not the fastest runner compared to some of these other guys, but you just stop.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I mean, obviously I'd never run that far before, and like you say, you know, I'm not necessarily a speedster, and I knew of a lot of the guys that were going to be there, and you know, obviously actually raced against a couple of them in races earlier in the year, and you know, they beat me by hours and hours, most of them. So it's a strange thing to start on a start line with people that you know are considerably faster than you, but actually still have that kind of belief in the back of your head that you might actually be able to outlast them. So
So
yeah,
when you first saw the last one standing format, what were your initial thoughts?
um, I think straight away I was like, so when I was running around Wales, my goal for the day, I knew that I could average, you know, 15 minutes a mile, 4 miles an hour, or you know, six-ish k an hour. And that was just my pace, and it's always been like, you know, an easy pace to maintain. It's something that I know that I can do comfortably. So as soon as I saw that kind of format of, you know, it's about 4 miles an hour, I was just like, you know, that is something that I'm not fast, but I can go 4 miles an hour. So it automatically kind of like tick those boxes in my head as something that I might actually be pretty good at.
Wow. So tell me about you know, your preparation leading up to Relapse, because such a new format. Not many people. I think people are still trying to work out what is the best strategy. But you seem to have come obviously prepared quite well. What was your preparation coming into Relapse?
I think that, yeah, I think that's one of the really exciting things about the format is that it you know, it is very different in terms of how you prepare for it. I'd done 2 milers in the lead up to Relapse, so my mileage was coming up, and it was basically just lots of long, slow runs, lots of some just going out and hiking at the weekend, some just long days. I do quite a lot of night shifts, so a lot of running at the end of a set of night shifts to kind of, you know, practice that running on tired legs and a tired head, dehydrated as well probably, and like underfed. So incorporating that kind of running when I know it's going to be difficult because you're already depleted, and simulating that time at kind of, you know, 20 hours in or whatever. Um, and basically, yeah, just lots of long, slow runs. I did find that I would go out and, you know, run 6.7k in a loop, and almost by accident, over an hour is just like a slow run. So closer towards the event, I'd kind of simulate that feeling of knowing what 6.7k is, and how that feels to get done. So kind of setting yourself up for that length of time.
Yeah. And during the Relapse, how did that all pan out?
It was an interesting one. My nutrition strategy had to change probably about 4 or 5 hours in. I had been eating so normally when I go out for the weekend, I will just eat normal, like, you know, sandwiches, crisps, a lot of trail mix, and I found actually I was running a little bit quicker than I'm actually used to, which when is not necessarily what most people will say. Most people, I think, train quite a lot quicker than the speeds that you're going at a backyard. But the majority of my runs are a little bit slower. So because I was speeding up, I think that my body just didn't cope with trying to take in that much solid food. It was quite warm as well, so that probably had an impact. So I moved from solid food to pretty much just tailwind and some gels, which actually seemed to work really well. And fortunately, I was able to steal enough tailwind from a friend who had pulled out after about half a day. So it was topped up with tailwinds and gels by other people for the rest of the 30 hours. So I think the nutrition was definitely the trickiest bit.
The race report of Relapse really sort of paints a picture of you being a very quiet, sort of kind of unassuming competitor going into that, you're always sort of, straight when you finish a lap, straight back into your tent and keeping to yourself, keeping pretty quiet. It seems to be sort of at these events, you are quite a almost, lack of a better word, a shy kind of person.
I think part of that is that you do kind of get into a zone of, you're thinking about getting your nutrition in, getting your sleep in, and you don't want to get too like invested in what other people are doing, or should I be doing this, should I be following like whatever this person's doing. But yeah, it's just very much kind of like head in the game and concentrating.
So at the end of every lap, what was your ritual?
Get in, have something to eat, have something to drink, and lie down and try and get some sleep, basically.
Yeah.
I think particularly if you're aiming to go for longer than 24 hours, it's important and beneficial to try and start getting some sleep early on and almost banking that up for later. You don't want to wait until you're 30 hours in and knackered and shattered, and then you're only able to catch like 2 or 3 minutes sleep. You kind of want to build it in as early as you can.
Yeah. So when you're getting close to that 30-hour mark, how is the mind and the body feeling?
I think probably around hour 27, 28, I was kind of like looking, or maybe like 26, somewhere around there. I was looking around at the guys that were left in, and I think Ian Evans particularly had been at the front consistently, leading the way. And I remember kind of seeing him like running off into the distance up a couple of the hills and being like, oh, this is actually starting to feel a bit tough, making it in 52 minutes. And Ian still looks as though he's just out for a Sunday afternoon stroll. Like, what's going to happen here? How am I going to keep this up? I think that is something that I've now kind of keyed into. You can't look at what other people are doing and feel bad or worry that you're not doing as well as them, because 2 laps later, Ian was out. No matter how good people look, and I think probably the same with Dave Proctor in over in Tennessee, looked absolutely phenomenal until he didn't. And people can look great, and 1 lap later, it's just you have a bad lap and they're out.
So you line up for hour 30. You're the only one there. What was that feeling like?
That was good. Yeah, it was. Surreal. I think probably. I think as much as you can kind of go into it hoping that you'll be the last person won and believing it, it's a very different thing. Thinking that at the start to actually kind of getting there and achieving it. Yeah, it was. I think it felt great until you turned the corner probably about a minute and a half into the lap. You turn a corner at the Riverhead course and there's not anyone there anymore. And I kind of like looked around and I was like, I didn't have to do this lap. What am I doing to myself? But it was good. I enjoyed it. Enjoyed it once I got to the first hill. Yeah.
And this is a question that you really can only ask a winner of the last one standing. Is there a small sense of disappointment that you weren't pushed further?
I think probably for Riverhead, not necessarily that I wasn't pushed further. It's just a weird sense of, it's not like getting to the end of another race where you're kind of like, whew, that's over. Like, everyone's kind of, achieved. It's it's almost anticlimactic of, wow, it's all of a sudden over when you just didn't know that was going to happen. So yeah, it's a sense of like, oh, like you do kind of wish that everyone else was still running, as much as you are very happy that they're not, because it means you get to finish as well. So yeah, it's a real. I still haven't been able to put my finger on exactly that explanation. I think I guess it's something you've got to experience to understand.
So you get to the end of that 30th lap, you crown the winner of Last One Standing, basically the only person without a DNF against their name. You get handed that golden ticket to Lazarus Lake's Biggs Backyard in Tennessee. What goes through your mind there? Can you enjoy the moment getting that coin, or just going, I don't want to do this again?
Oh no, I was 100%. It was no. I was not ready to do it the next day, but excited to be able to go out and give it another go. Yeah.
Now, at the end of Relapse, it took you a bit to recover from it. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I started to have knee niggles probably about even like 15, 16 hours in, mainly from the downhill. I'd had a knee injury back in January of that year that took 5 or 6 weeks to come back from, and it was basically just a repetition of the same injury. So I actually came back to work for a week or two and then flew back to the UK for a couple of weeks for some weddings and to see the family. So it was slow going. I think I saw a physio just before I left, but then I had 3-4 weeks over in the UK where I didn't really get any kind of a treatment or assessment on the knee. Wasn't really progressing at all. Went out and tried to do some runs in the UK because why not? And there was a lot of stuff I wanted to explore in the UK, which probably wasn't very beneficial. And so, yeah, it probably took about 2 months for it to come right. When I got back to the UK, I started seeing a physio in Nelson, who I worked really well with. So he's definitely got the leg feeling a huge amount stronger. And particularly, I had no issues at all with the knee over in Tennessee, which is really good.
So you had then I think it was about 6 months to prepare, I guess, for Biggs.
Yeah.
So once you're over that knee issue, what did your preparation look like, and how was it different to before Relapse?
I never quite got up to the mileage that I would have liked to, and that was partially because of the knee and the rehab from that. So I I got up to doing probably about 80 Ks a week at my maximum, and that was before I'd mainly been doing trail stuff, but because of the way that Biggs works, you're on a road overnight. So I switched it up and probably did about half my training on the road, which is slightly less enjoyable than trails, but still training. So yeah, it was a kind of combination of getting back out onto the trails, getting onto the road, but actually the majority was really rehabbing the knee and trying to really work on strength. So I worked physio for doing kind of 20 minutes an hour of exercises, particularly for the knee, nearly every day for most of that time. And I think that was really beneficial, and probably even more so than necessarily going out and slashing mileage and just making myself more injured.
So going into Biggs Backyard, you obviously learnt a lot from the Riverhead Relapse. What changes did you make?
I think the nutrition was definitely something that I thought a lot more about. I obviously kept the tailwind going and used that. Looked at how I was using caffeine as well. So made sure that I was kind of using caffeine in the early morning throughout to the afternoon, and then kind of cut off caffeine use so that I could sleep overnight. And I think that was really good. It meant that I wasn't kind of buzzing too much overnight, so that I wasn't sleeping. I got a good couple of laps where I had a good 5, 6, 7 minutes sleep in, and then really, dialing in the nutrition, making sure that I was getting enough food in. I had a lot of mashed potatoes, a lot of spring energy gels. So trying to combine that like real food, but real food that's actually palatable.
So you turned up to Biggs. Obviously, it must be quite an intimidating event to rock up to, particularly, being the first female to win a Last One Standing anywhere in the world. But not just that, so many people who had gone much further than the 30 hours that you had done.
Yeah.
How does it feel turning up to something like Big's Backyard with obviously quite a lot of expectation from everybody?
It's a weird one, eh? I think partially it's quite nice to kind of turn up and, you know, people don't really know who you are, and I didn't necessarily feel like there was a huge expectation of me. I think I was expecting a lot of myself, but I didn't feel that there was a lot of pressure from, you know, people back home, or you know, everyone knew that yes, I'd done really well at this one race, but you know, I don't have the same caliber of running as a lot of the guys that and girls that do turn up at Big's Backyard. So it was quite nice to just be able to fade into the background and, you know, watch the big names do their thing, and just run slightly behind everyone, and occasionally tap in and say, you know, hi to people. Yeah, I made sure that I got there pretty early on. I knew that kind of intimidation factor would probably play a part. So I actually arrived early enough that I went down to Laz's place probably a week before. He was just marking out the rest of the course and doing the markings on the road to make sure that it was the right distance. So I got to go out on the course and run it, and almost like set myself up mentally for being there before the crowds arrived. So that was quite nice.
Yeah, so the daytime trail, obviously a lot harder than the nighttime road course.
Yeah.
The reports of the trail that I've read, which is very interesting, sort of towards the end, it sounds like there's almost like cliffs, you know, what appear to be sort of small steps by the end turn into these, you know, monstrous cliffs that you almost need to abseil down. And I think it might have been yourself talking about how by the end, you know, just trying to go down a small step is torture.
Yeah, particularly I think that the last loop that I didn't actually complete, coming back down it was exactly like that. There's a couple of steps that, you know, they're a reasonable size. Like, I mean, you can run up and down them in the first couple of hours, but they do feel a lot bigger towards the end. And that last loop coming back down it, I literally just couldn't get my muscles to move enough to actually make the step. I had to kind of walk along this little step and find a tree branch and kind of abseil down via the tree to get down it, which is hilarious when you think that I've done it probably about 15, 16 times probably 25 times in the last 50 hours, so without an issue at all.
So the daytime laps, you were getting sort of only 6-8 minutes rest on each lap. So during that period, what would you do? The same thing, just lie down, nutrition, and shut your eyes?
Yeah, pretty much. So I tried to eat and drink a little bit more out on the course than I had done at Biggs, so that I had more time concentrated into just resting. I mean, looking back, probably what I would do more next time is get a little bit more stretching in. So I would finish every lap with walking for probably the last like half a k or so to ease into the rest period, but I didn't do a huge amount of stretching or rolling, which is something that I'll think about if this year and practice and see if that's going to be beneficial or not. The payoff is that the more kind of fat thing you do when you get into camp, the less rest you get in terms of trying to sleep. So it's trying to work out where that line is of what's the most beneficial thing to be doing, and that's trial and error, I think, still at the moment.
So out on course, did you have a strategy of, you know, where you would run, where you would walk?
Not necessarily where I'd run and walk, but I definitely have my markers of like, you know, I should be at, you know, 53 minutes when I get to that tree. I should be at, you know, like, you know, when you get to the V tree, you should be, you know, at 1 hour or whatever. So there's definitely sections that, you know, the time that you should be, and if you are a little bit late, then, you know, put on a bit of a spurt at some stage. Yeah.
So the nighttime course, you were getting, I think, about 12 minutes, 13 minutes.
Yeah.
Was that a relief to be able to, even though you're running through the night, was it a relief to be getting that much more rest?
It was really important, I think, for sleep. The difficulty is that obviously the longer that you stop, the more your muscles kind of start seizing up and tensing up. So again, it's that payoff of how long is too long, and how important is it to get a couple of minutes of sleep. So, and again, I don't know if I've quite worked out in my head where that line is yet, but something to play around with.
Yeah. Now you started to get a bit of a hip niggle during, and I think it was about 36 hours.
Yeah.
How did you try and address that during the event?
I think I basically just tried to ignore it, which is probably not the thing to do. So I tried to stretch it out as I was in the road loop, and I started trying to do a little bit of massage during the run. I had like a little foam roller ball with me and tried to do a bit of that like during the night, but I just don't think I got onto it quite quick enough. So the flare up just got worse and worse.
Yeah. And obviously towards the end, getting close to 50 hours, what was, how was your mind at that stage, having been up for more than 2 days?
Yeah, I think it's surprisingly pretty good. I haven't really had any like of these fun hallucinations that people seem to
Like Will
get.
Hayward?
Nothing as extreme as that. Yeah, so I wasn't all completely with it by any means, but I still felt pretty positive. I think the idea of switching on to the road from the road loop to the day loop is pretty daunting, because you know that it's going to be a lot tougher on your legs, and I knew this hip was not feeling great, so that was daunting. I fell over a couple of times on that first loop of the day course, and obviously I think that was just to do with tiredness and lack of your proprioception from being completely exhausted. So that was definitely starting to have an effect on my running. But I mean, I was still very positive about kind of carrying on, I think.
I've read that you've sort of thought a lot about that hip niggle and whether you use that as an excuse to finish up. How do you still feel about that? Does that still play on your mind?
I think I'm still a little bit frustrated that I made the decision that I didn't think that it was possible to finish the lap in time, and so I didn't bother trying. I think probably I'd feel a little bit easier about it if I'd like carried on and tried to make the loop. I don't think that I would have finished it, and certainly with that experience of attempting to walk back to the start and not even being able to get down this cliff, I think it's completely unreasonable to think that I would have been able to finish the whole course in even 2 hours. I don't think it would have been possible, but I think that mentally it would be easier to tell myself that it's okay to stop if I'd actually carried on and given it a go. So I mean, I made the call that I didn't think it was possible, which I still think is true, but you leave yourself open to that element of the what if I'd just carried on pushing, then things can change. So that's the only slightly lasting regret, I suppose.
So 50 hours, from what I heard from Maggie Guttel, the eventual winner, you're one of the most gracious bow outs that she'd ever seen. And then after that, there are only 3 left in Will Hayward, Dave Proctor, and Maggie. What was it like watching that last part unfold?
It was fantastic. I think I went and I probably had about a hour sleep, and after David bowed out, and got back up, and it was the atmosphere was just amazing. The weather turned absolutely awful, It was like pounding with rain for pretty much, I think, like the whole 8 hours after I'd stopped. So in a way, it was quite nice to be able to go in and hide under some tarpaulin and watch from some shelter. Yeah, it was it. The atmosphere is just incomparable to any other type of event that I've done. I think trail events always have a great atmosphere, that community feel, but the switching from being a competitor to an observer was just it's a nice way of finishing it, to be able to stand and kind of see how everything unfolds.
Yeah. So now you can never turn up to another last one standing as an unknown. You pretty much put your name. You pretty much put your name on the map as a serious competitor in this format. Are you lining up for bigs again this year?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I've already booked my flights over to the States, so finishing work so that I can get out there a bit early and have some time to train out in the States as well, which would be nice.
Yeah, this year's going to be fantastic. There's Johan Steen, you've got Courtney DeWalter, and
tell me about it.
It's going to be a stellar lineup, but also yourself in there. In the lead up.
I think there's enough people, enough big names there that I can still hide in the background, so I'm all right. Yeah.
Not many people have gone 50 hours plus.
Okay.
So what are you doing anything different? What have you learned from bigs and going forward?
So I think most of the year is just about building up the my ability to kind of push my body that bit further. I haven't so far been able to go over about 80-90 kilometers a week in training without a niggle arising. So it's just about kind of gradually building up what my body can cope with. I'm doing a lot of strength work. So I've started working with a personal trainer in Nelson at one of the local gyms, which has been really good. And I already feel a huge amount stronger from that. And I'm hoping that'll kind of tie into me being able to push the body a bit further. And really keying in what you do with those 6-7 minutes. Because I think that is really the focus of where your race is either won or lost, with what you do in your time to solve problems and keep yourself going.
Yeah. When I was talking to Lazarus Lake last week, we're talking about sort of how people prepare for it, and what he said was that a lot of the runners didn't realize how much walking was going to be involved in a last one standing, but also that they hadn't actually incorporated a lot of walking into it. And I assume that with your big weekends up in the mountains, there must be a lot of that you're able to incorporate in.
Yeah, I do. Like I say, I think probably unlike most people in this race, if I'm doing a backyard, I'm actually running quicker than I normally do in training. So, and that's to make sure that I get those 5 or 6 minutes. So, I just went and did this a big week of training, which was mainly kind of vertical climbing, very few kilometers for the number of hours we were out. And that's because it was all walking over difficult terrain. And I think that's, I'm certainly spending the next kind of 2 to 3 months really just building up that base, and a lot of that base is just going to be walking with a big heavy backpack and building up some strength from that. And I've really cut down the number of races that I'm doing, which is a shame, because I keep seeing these races and thinking about signing up for them, but it's really difficult to get the base training in and be doing a lot of races. So I'm trying to resist the temptation at the moment, and really just work on getting out and getting some walking miles in the legs. Yeah.
Now we've got in August this year, we've got the Australian last one standing, which is called the Clint Eastwood, and we're lucky to have the famous Lazarus Lake coming out to it. What tip would you give to someone doing a last one standing for the first time?
I think just enjoy it. It depends, I guess, on your goals. If you're going in wanting to run your first kind of sub 2400 mile, or if you're going in wanting to carry on and see it through to the end. I'd think about what necessarily your goals are. If you want to see it through to the end, then not having a goal is probably the best goal, because as soon as you put a number onto it, then you're kind of digging your own grave in a way, I think. But just get in, enjoy it, and take it 1 milepost at a time. I don't even necessarily think about it as going out for a certain number of laps. It's I'm going to run for 6 minutes until I hit that tree, and then from that tree, it's another 5 minutes until I get to that bend. Really breaking it up in your mind into small chunks is, I think, probably one of the best things to do.
Now, with Laz out here for the event in August, we're going to put him to work. What sort of job do you reckon we should get him doing?
He's very good at blowing whistles, so
he's already claimed that job. I need him. He told me he's not allowed to make tea.
Okay.
So, what do you reckon he's going to be good for anything else apart from blowing a whistle?
I think blowing a whistle and writing the story seems to be his bag. So he's a very good storyteller, isn't he?
He certainly has a very deep insight, particularly in the later stages of the events, and it's almost poetic the way that he writes. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Reading that, it was a treat to spend a couple of days afterwards, kind of scrolling through some of his Facebook posts about the event, kind of almost reliving it 3 days, which was nice.
Yes. Well, Katie, it's been absolutely fantastic to chat to you. Like I said earlier, you're my favourite ultra runner. And it's going to be exciting to watch you this year. I love following your Instagram, and seeing bigs unfold this year is going to be an absolute treat for, I think, everybody around the world.
It's going to be a big one, isn't it? It's I'm excited for it already. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Katie, thank you for being on Chats from the Chest Freezer.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been good fun.